The year was 2347, and humanity had finally done it. After centuries of dreaming, fighting, and building, they had created ships that could travel faster than light. The stars were no longer distant lights in the sky. They were destinations. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of the UENS Horizon, watching the swirling colors of hyperspace through the main window. He was 62 years old, with gray hair cut short and a face marked by decades of service. He had fought in the Mars Rebellion, the Europa Crisis, and the Belt Wars. He had seen humanity at its worst and its best. Now he was leading the first human fleet beyond their own solar system. 10 minutes to arrival, Admiral, said Commander, his tactical officer. She was younger than him by 20 years, but her eyes held the same sharpness. She had earned her position through skill, not politics. Park nodded slowly. Signal all ships, Formation Alpha, we arrive as one. Behind the horizon, 49 other vessels held their positions. They were not large ships by human standards. The biggest was barely a kilometer long. Their hulls were made of titanium and steel, painted dark gray. They carried missile tubes and nuclear warheads. They were built for war, though today's mission was peace. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace, and Park saw the Council station for the first time. It was enormous. The station stretched across space like a flower made of light and crystal. Hundreds of ships surrounded it, each one different from the others. Some were smooth and organic, looking like sea creatures frozen in glass. Others were angular and covered in glowing symbols. The smallest of them was twice the size of the horizon. They are scanning us, reported. I count over 300 vessels in the area. Park kept his face calm. Let them look, we have nothing to hide. A transmission came through. An alien voice, translated by the ship's computer, filled the bridge. Human vessels, you will proceed to docking Area 7. Do not deviate from the assigned path. Weapons must remain powered down. The Council will see you when it is ready. The tone was cold and dismissive, like an adult speaking to a child who had wandered into an important meeting. Park pressed the response button. This is Admiral Park of the United Earth Navy. We thank you for your welcome and will follow your instructions. He cut the channel and looked at. She raised an eyebrow but said nothing. The fleet docked without incident. Park changed into his formal uniform, black with gold trim, medals on his chest, and joined Ambassador at the airlock. Was a small woman with silver-streaked hair and calm eyes. She had spent 30 years in diplomacy, negotiating treaties between Earth's many nations. Now she would speak for all of humanity. Are you ready, Admiral? She asked. I was about to ask you the same thing. She smiled slightly. I have faced angry presidents and stubborn generals. How different can aliens be? They walked through the station's corridors, escorted by floating drones that hummed with energy. The walls were made of something that looked like living crystal, pulsing with soft light. Other beings moved past them, tall creatures with too many eyes, small ones that seemed to float without legs, massive forms that shook the floor with each step. None of them looked at the humans. It was as if they did not exist. The Council chamber was a vast circular room with 12 elevated platforms arranged in a ring. Each platform held representatives from a different empire. In the center, far below, was a small circle where visitors were meant to stand. Park took their places in that circle. Above them, alien eyes looked down. High Sovereign of the Empire spoke first. He was humanoid but taller, with pale blue skin and silver hair that flowed like water. His voice carried across the chamber like music, but his words were not kind. So these are the humans, he said. The creatures who just discovered faster travel and believe they deserve a place among the stars. Laughter rippled through the chamber. It was a strange sound, clicking, hissing, rumbling, but the meaning was clear. Another voice joined in. This one came from a creature that looked like a mountain of dark rock with glowing red eyes, Lord of the Dominion. I have seen their ships, metal boxes with explosive weapons. My people built better vessels 10,000 years ago. More laughter. Ambassador stood perfectly still. Her face showed nothing. Park felt his hands tighten into fists, but he kept them at his sides. We have come in peace, said, her voice steady and clear. Humanity wishes to join the galactic community. We offer trade, knowledge, and friendship. Leaned forward, his silver eyes cold. Friendship? What could your species possibly offer us? You live barely 100 years. You have been traveling between stars for less than a decade. Your entire history is filled with war and destruction. We have watched your planet. We know what you are. Then you know we are survivors, replied. We have faced extinction many times, we are still here. Surviving is not the same as thriving, said another council member, a being made of floating lights that shifted and swirled. You are children playing at being adults. The galaxy does not need more children. The council deliberated among themselves for what felt like hours. Parkin were forced to stand and wait. No seats were offered, no water, no respect. Finally spoke again. The council has decided. Humanity will be granted the 442 system. 1 star, 3 barren planets. You will pay tribute to the council, 20% of all resources you gather. You will not expand beyond your assigned territory. You will not interfere with council affairs. These terms are not negotiable. Took a slow breath, and if we decline. The chamber went silent, stared at her as if she had spoken nonsense. Decline, he laughed, and the sound was not pleasant. Little human, you do not decline. You accept what we give you and be grateful. Your fleet of 50 ships is nothing. I could destroy them with a thought. The Empire has 10,000 vessels that have twice that. You are insects. Park stepped forward. We did not come here to be insulted. Then you should not have come at all, waved his hand dismissively. Go back to your metal boxes, human. Tell your leaders that this is their only chance. Accept our terms or we will teach you the price of refusing. The drones escorted them out. The laughter followed them all the way to their ship. On the bridge of the horizon, Park stood at the window, watching the council station shrink as the fleet pulled away. They will attack us, said quietly. They cannot allow us to refuse and remain unpunished. I know, Park replied. What do we do? Park turned to face his crew, men and women who had trusted him with their lives, who would follow him into whatever came next. We go home, he said, and we get ready for war. 3 months passed after the humiliation at the council station. Earth prepared for what was coming. Factories worked day and night. Shipyards built new vessels as fast as they could. Every man and woman who could hold a weapon trained for battle. The message from the stars was clear: bow down or die. Humanity chose neither. Fleet Commander stood on the bridge of the UENS Defiance, watching the sensor screens. He was 45 years old, tall and lean, with a scar running down his left cheek from an old battle. He had commanded ships since he was 23. He had never lost a fight. He did not plan to start now. Commander, we have contacts emerging from hyperspace, reported Lieutenant O, his weapons officer. She was young, only 28, but she had the fastest reflexes in the fleet. Her fingers never left her console. How many? Asked. 207 vessels. Design. They are forming up near Jupiter's orbit. Nodded slowly. The enemy had come just as Admiral Park had predicted. The Third Fleet, sent to punish the humans for their refusal, 200 warships against humanity's defenders. Earth had positioned 120 vessels in the system. They were spread out, hiding behind moons and asteroids, waiting in the darkness. They did not know they were there. A transmission came through on the open channel. The face of a commander appeared on screen. He was handsome by their standards, with sharp features and cold silver eyes. Humans of Sol, he said, his voice dripping with contempt. I am Fleet Master of the Empire. You were given a chance to accept your place. You refused. Now you will learn the cost of your arrogance. Surrender your ships and your planet and we will be merciful. Resist and you will be destroyed. Looked at the screen for a long moment. Then he pressed the response button. This is Commander of the United Earth Navy. You have entered our home without permission. You threaten our families, our children, our future. We do not surrender. We do not kneel. If you want Earth, come and take it. He cut the channel. His fleet began to advance. Their ships were beautiful in a terrible way, long, curved vessels made of crystal that glowed with inner light. Each one was 3 times the size of a human destroyer. Their weapons were energy beams that could cut through metal like water through paper. They moved in perfect formation, a wall of light and death. All ships, this is Commander, he said over the fleet channel. Execute Hornet Protocol, let them see what humans can do. The human ships emerged from hiding. They did not fly in formation. They did not advance in a neat line. They scattered like angry wasps, dozens of small vessels sweeping toward the enemy from every direction. They had expected a simple battle, 2 fleets facing each other, exchanging fire until one side broke. They had fought wars this way for 10,000 years. Humans did not fight that way. Lieutenant O watched her targeting computer lock onto the nearest cruiser. Batteries charged, missiles armed. Fire ordered. The Defiance shuddered as it unleashed their fury. These were not elegant weapons. They were simple metal rods accelerated to incredible speeds by magnetic fields. No fancy energy shields could stop them. They hit the cruiser and punched straight through its crystalline hull, tearing out the other side in a spray of debris. The cruiser exploded. All across the battlefield, the same scene repeated. Human ships darted between the larger vessels, firing from angles the enemy never expected. The crystal ships tried to turn, tried to bring their weapons to bear, but they were too slow. They had been built for parade, not for chaos. "They're breaking formation," someone shouted on the bridge. O smiled grimly, missiles away, full spread. A wave of missiles streaked toward a battleship. The alien vessel fired its point defense, beams of light that destroyed some missiles, but not enough. The rest struck home. Nuclear fire bloomed in the void, and when it faded, the battleship was gone. Fleet Master screamed orders at his captains. This was not possible. These were primitives. These were insects. How were they dying so fast? A human destroyer, the UENS Arrow, made a suicide run its flagship. It took hit after hit, its hull torn open, atmosphere venting into space. But it kept coming. At the last moment, it launched every missile it had at point-blank range. The flagship's shields flickered and died. Its engines went dark, barely escaped in a shuttle as his command vessel broke apart. Captain IM of the UENS Ghost led her squadron of stealth destroyers through the heart of the enemy fleet. Her ships were painted black, running silent, invisible to sensors. They emerged behind a group of supply vessels and opened fire. The supply ships had no weapons, no armor. They died in seconds. Without supplies, the fleet could not sustain itself. Without command ships, they could not coordinate. Without hope, they began to run. "They're retreating," his voice came over the command channel. She was aboard the Horizon with Admiral Park watching the battle from a distance. "All ships pursue and destroy, no mercy." The human fleet chased the fleeing. Some alien ships managed to reach hyperspace. Most did not. The darkness of space filled with fire and debris and the screams of dying aliens. 4 hours after the battle began, it ended. Commander stood on his bridge looking at the sensor display. Where 200 enemy ships had been, there was now only wreckage. 187 vessels destroyed. The greatest defeat their empire had suffered in 5,000 years. "Human casualties?" he asked quietly. 11 ships lost, sir," O reported. Her voice was tired but steady. 3,200 personnel killed in action. Closed his eyes for a moment. 3,000 lives. Fathers, mothers, sons, daughters. They had given everything to protect their home. "Record their names," he said. "Every single one, they will be remembered." On Earth, people watched the battle recordings in stunned silence. They had expected defeat. They had prepared for occupation, for slavery, for death. Instead, they had won. Admiral Park addressed the planet from the bridge of the Horizon. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with something fierce. "Today we proved something," he said. "We proved that humanity will not bow. We proved that our ships, our weapons, and our courage are enough to defeat any enemy that came to destroy us. We sent them home in ruins. Let the galaxy see. Let them all see. We are not insects. We are not children. We are humanity, and we will not be conquered." Across the stars, the message spread. The Council received the battle recordings. They watched in horror as their mightiest empire's fleet was torn apart by primitive vessels. They had laughed at humanity's ships. No one was laughing now. In his palace on the High Sovereign watched the recordings again and again. His hands shook with rage. This was impossible. This was unacceptable. "Summon the Council," he commanded. "All of them, every empire, every fleet. If humanity wants war, we will give them a war they cannot survive." The galaxy was about to learn that humans were not just survivors. They were fighters. The news of the defeat spread across the galaxy like fire. In 10,000 years, no lesser species had ever defeated a council empire in battle. The order of things had been fixed, unchanging, eternal. The strong ruled, the weak served. That was the law of the universe. Humanity had broken that law. High Sovereign called an emergency meeting of the Galactic Council. For the first time in 3 centuries, all 12 empires sent their highest leaders in person. The chamber that had once echoed with laughter at humanity's expense was now filled with fear and anger. "This cannot stand," declared. His silver eyes were wild, his elegant composure shattered. They destroyed 187 of our finest ships. They killed 50,000 of our warriors. They must be punished. Lord of the Dominion slammed his massive stone fist against his platform. Punished? They must be exterminated, burned from existence. Their planet should be turned to ash. Agreed, hissed the speaker, a serpentine creature with scales that shifted colors as it moved. If we allow this insult to go unanswered, every lesser species in the galaxy will think they can challenge us. One by one, the council members voiced their support. The wanted revenge. The wanted to prove their strength. The others wanted to maintain the order that had kept them in power for so long. Only the eldest of them, High Counselor of the, remained silent. He was ancient beyond measure, a being of pure energy contained in a crystalline shell. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had watched species evolve and go extinct. When he finally spoke, his voice was like distant thunder. "You are all fools," he said. The chamber went silent. "I watched the battle recordings," continued. "I studied their tactics, their weapons, their behavior. These humans are not like other lesser species. They do not fight for territory or resources. They fight for survival. They fight with desperation. And desperate creatures are the most dangerous of all. Sneered, they are primitives with metal ships and explosive weapons. We have 15,000 vessels between our fleets. They have barely 500. Numbers mean nothing if you do not know how to use them," replied. "When did any of you last fight a real war? A war where defeat meant extinction. You have grown soft, all of you. You win battles with overwhelming force because you have forgot how to win any other way." "Then what do you suggest?" demanded. "We let them go unpunished." Was silent for a long moment. Then he sighed, a sound like wind through empty halls. "No, I suppose we cannot, but mark my words, this war will cost us more than you imagine." The council voted unanimously to form a coalition. All 12 empires would contribute ships and soldiers. Together, they would assemble the largest fleet in galactic history and crush humanity once and for all. On Earth, President addressed the United Nations of Earth. She was 57 years old, with short black hair and a face that showed both strength and kindness. She had led humanity through the years of preparation, through the terror of waiting for the enemy to come. "My fellow humans," she said, her voice carried to every screen on the planet and every ship in the fleet. "The galaxy has decided to destroy us. 12 empires, 15,000 warships, trillions of soldiers. They are coming to burn our world and end our species." She paused, letting the weight of those words sink in. "But we will not make it easy for them." Admiral Park was given command of the combined human fleet. 3,000 vessels built in secret shipyards across the system. Among them were the new Titan-class dreadnoughts, designed by engineer Shin. These monsters were 2 kilometers long, bristling with weapons, armored with layers of steel and composite materials. They were ugly, brutal, and absolutely deadly. Park studied the intelligence reports in his office aboard the Horizon. Commander sat across from him, reviewing tactical data. 15,000 ships, she said. "Even with our new vessels, we are outnumbered 5-1. "Numbers are not everything," Park replied. "You saw how they fought. They moved in formation, fired in sequence, retreated in order, like a dance they have practiced for. And we do not dance." "No, we do not." Intelligence Director Han Sora entered the room. She was a quiet woman with sharp eyes and a gift for finding secrets. Her agents had infiltrated alien communication networks, gathering information that no human was supposed to have. "I have something," she said, placing a data chip on the table. "The Coalition fleet is gathering at the Nexus Point, 300 light-years from here. They plan to arrive in Sol's system in 6 weeks. 6 weeks, Park murmured. Not much time. "There is more." Han activated the chip, and holographic images filled the room. "I analyzed their communication patterns, their command structures, their historical records. Admiral, these empires have not fought a real war in over 10,000 years. Their last major conflict was a border dispute that lasted 3 months and ended in a negotiated peace." Leaned forward. "They have no experience with total war." "None," Han confirmed. "Their officers train for ceremonies and parades. Their soldiers have never faced an enemy that fights back. Their tactics are taken from ancient textbooks that have not been updated in." Park stood and walked to the window. Stars filled the darkness, cold and distant. "They think they are coming to execute us," he said quietly. They think this will be easy, like stepping on an insect. They have no idea what they are walking into. He turned back to face his officers. Here is what we will do. We will not meet them in open battle. We will not give them the fight they expect. We will use every trick, every trap, every weapon we have. We will make them bleed for every kilometer they advance. We will turn our system into a graveyard for their fleets. Nodded slowly. The belt, we can hide our ships there among the ice and rock. They will have to come through to reach Earth. Exactly, and we will be waiting. Across Sol system, humanity prepared for the final battle. Mining ships dragged asteroids into position, turning them into weapons. Engineers planted nuclear charges on frozen moons. Soldiers trained in zero-gravity combat, practicing how to board enemy vessels. On Earth, civilians said goodbye to their families. Parents held their children close. Lovers made promises they might not be able to keep. Everyone knew what was coming. Everyone knew that failure meant extinction. But there was no panic, no chaos, only grim determination. In a small apartment in Seoul, an old woman lit a candle and prayed. In a factory in Berlin, workers loaded missiles onto transport ships. In a training facility in Brazil, a young pilot named Bay flew her 1000th simulation and finally achieved a perfect score. Humanity had spent its entire existence fighting. Against nature, against disease, against each other. They had nearly destroyed themselves a dozen times, but they had learned from those wars. They had become something that the galaxy had never seen. A species that refused to die. In orbit around Earth, Admiral Park stood on the bridge of the horizon and watched the fleet assemble. 3,000 ships, each one crewed by men and women ready to give their lives for their home. They think we are insects, he said too. They think one fleet can swat us away. And when they realize they are wrong, she asked. Park's eyes were hard as steel. Then they will learn why humans should never be underestimated. The coalition fleet was coming, 15,000 ships from 12 empires. Humanity was ready. The coalition fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Sol system, and for a moment, space itself seemed to hold its breath. 15,000 vessels hung in the darkness like stars made solid. Crystalline cruisers gleamed beside the massive stone fortresses of the serpent ships coiled between vessels that glowed with inner light. 12 empires united, the greatest military force ever assembled in galactic history. High Sovereign stood on the command platform of his flagship, the Eternal Crown. Around him, holographic displays showed every ship under his command. He smiled with satisfaction. Begin the advance, he ordered. Standard conquest formation. We will be in Earth orbit within 3 days. The fleet moved forward. They expected no resistance. Their sensors showed only scattered asteroid fields and distant planets. The human fleet was nowhere to be seen. Cowards, Lord laughed over the command channel. They have fled before our might. We will find them hiding behind their moon and crush them like the vermin they are. But Admiral Park had not fled. He stood on the bridge of the horizon, hidden deep within the belt. Around him, 3,000 human ships waited in the darkness, engines cold, running silent. They were scattered among billions of ice chunks and rocks, invisible to sensors. Status report, Park said quietly. Commander checked her displays. All units in position, stealth squadron ready, asteroid team standing by. The enemy is entering the kill zone. Park nodded. Wait until they are committed, then we spring the trap. Captain IM of the UENS Ghost floated in her command chair, watching the coalition fleet pass overhead. Her stealth destroyers had been hiding among the asteroids for 3 weeks, eating cold rations and sleeping in shifts. Now the waiting was over. All Ghost units, this is, she whispered into her communicator. Target the supply ships at the rear, hit them hard, hit them fast, then disappear. Go. 12 black ships powered up simultaneously. They had been designed for this moment, small, fast, almost invisible. They struck the coalition's supply convoy from behind, tearing through unarmored hulls. Fuel tankers exploded. Ammunition carriers detonated in chains of fire. Food transports broke apart. In 30 seconds, the coalition lost 40% of its supplies. Alarms screamed across the alien command network, spun around, staring at his displays in disbelief. What is happening? Where did they come from? Unknown contacts, an officer shouted. They appeared from nowhere. Our rear guard is under attack. Turn the fleet around, destroy them. But the ghost squadron was already gone, vanishing back into the asteroid field like shadows. Then the main human fleet struck. Park's voice rang out across the command channel. All ships attack for Earth, for humanity. 3,000 vessels erupted from hiding. They came from above, below, and every side, pouring out of the asteroid field like angry hornets from a disturbed nest. The coalition formation, designed for parade ground precision, could not adapt fast enough. The UENS Defiance led a squadron of destroyers straight into the heart of the enemy fleet. Commander stood on his bridge, shouting orders as his ship wove between crystalline giants. Target their command ships, cut off their heads. Lieutenant O locked onto a command cruiser and fired. Rounds punched through shields that had never been tested in real combat. The cruiser's bridge exploded, and the vessel began to drift, dead. All around, chaos erupted. Human ships did not fight in formation. They fought in wolf packs, small groups hunting larger prey. They used asteroids as cover, ducking behind them to reload, then emerging to strike again. They rammed ice chunks into enemy vessels, turning frozen water into weapons. The coalition commanders screamed at each other over their communications. The formation is breaking. Ships are retreating without orders. Where are the humans coming from? They are everywhere. Tried to restore order. All ships form defensive clusters, concentrate fire on. An asteroid 500 meters wide slammed into the Eternal Crown at tremendous speed. It had been pushed by human mining vessels hours ago, set on a collision course that no one had noticed. The flagship's shields held for 1 second, 2 seconds, then collapsed. The asteroid tore through the vessel's midsection. Barely made it to an escape pod before his ship died. Sergeant Major No led a Marine boarding team onto a crippled battleship. His squad wore heavy armor and carried magnetic rifles. They moved through the alien corridors like wolves through a sheep pen. "Contact ahead," one of his soldiers shouted. Warriors appeared, massive creatures of living rock, slow but powerful. In any other war, they would have been terrifying. Did not hesitate. Grenades now. Explosions tore through the corridor. The warriors, designed for ceremonial combat, had never faced such brutal efficiency. They fell, crumbled, and died. The Marines reached the battleship's engine room and planted charges. 5 minutes later, they were back on their shuttle. Behind them, the vessel exploded from within. Lieutenant Bay sat at her communications console aboard the Horizon, intercepting enemy transmissions. What she heard made her smile grimly. "Admiral," she reported, "their command network is collapsing. The different empires are blaming each other for the losses. They are accusing thee of cowardice. They are demanding to retreat. They are not working together anymore." Park nodded. "Just as we planned. Keep monitoring. Tell our squadrons to focus on isolated groups." The battle raged for 18 hours. It was not a single engagement, but 100 smaller battles, fought across millions of kilometers. Human ships darted and struck and retreated, never giving the enemy a clean target. Coalition vessels, built for direct confrontation, found themselves fighting an enemy they could not pin down. The new Titan-class dreadnoughts proved their worth. The UENS Vengeance, commanded by Captain Moon, destroyed 37 enemy vessels before finally going down, her crew fighting to the last moment. The UENS Thunderbolt lasted even longer, its guns still firing as it rammed a carrier. But humanity paid a price. 800 ships destroyed, 40,000 men and women dead, families torn apart, futures erased. As the 18th hour ended, something broke in the coalition fleet. It started with the who turned and fled toward hyperspace. Then the followed. Then the others, one by one, each empire deciding that this battle was not worth dying for. Their pride shattered, were the last to retreat. 7,000 surviving ships limped toward the edge of the system, leaving 5,000 wrecks behind them. Admiral Park watched them go. His face showed no triumph, only exhaustion. "Should we pursue?" asked. "No, let them run. Let them tell the galaxy what happened here." He turned to look at Earth, visible now as a small blue dot in the distance. His home, the home of everyone he had ever loved. "We did it," he said quietly. "We actually did it." Around him, his crew began to cheer. The sound spread from ship to ship, a wave of joy and relief and disbelief. They had faced the greatest military force in galactic history, and they had won. But Park did not cheer. He thought of the 40,000 who would never cheer again. He thought of the battles still to come. The war was not over, but humanity had proven something that day. They had proven that courage and cunning could defeat numbers and arrogance. They had proven that a species fighting for survival could overcome any obstacle. Earth's moon bore new craters from fallen ships. Debris would orbit the sun for centuries, but the planet was safe. Humanity had survived. Now it was time to show the galaxy what that meant. 6 months had passed since the Battle of the Line. The galaxy had changed forever. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of the horizon once again, watching the Council station grow larger in the viewport. Behind him flew 5,000 human warships, sleek and battle-tested. They were not here to beg for scraps. They were here to collect what they had earned. Receiving docking instructions, Lieutenant Bay reported. They are very polite this time. Commander allowed herself a small smile. Amazing what winning a war can do for diplomatic relations. The human fleet docked at the best positions, the ones reserved for council members. No one objected. Ambassador led the delegation into the council chamber. She wore the same simple black suit she had worn on her first visit, but she walked differently now. Her steps were confident, her head held high. The chamber was half empty. The platform stood dark and abandoned. High Sovereign had been executed by his own people after the disaster of the war. His empire had collapsed into civil war as different factions blamed each other for the defeat. The platform was also empty. Lord had retreated to his, where angry citizens had torn him apart in the streets. The Dominion had splintered into a dozen warring states. The remaining council members watched the humans approach with fear in their eyes. High Counselor was the first to speak. His crystalline form flickered with age and weariness, but his voice remained strong. You have come as I knew you would, not as supplicants but as victors. The question now is, what do you want? Ambassador looked up at the ancient being. We want what every species wants: safety, prosperity, a future for our children. You could have taken everything, said. Your fleet could have swept across the galaxy, burning and conquering. Many of us expected exactly that. Why did you stop? Because we are not like you. The words hung in the air, tilted his crystalline head. Explain. Stepped forward. For 10,000 years the Council ruled through fear. You conquered lesser species, enslaved them, exploited them. You took what you wanted because you could. You thought that was strength. She paused, letting her words sink in. But real strength is not about how much you can take. It is about how much you can build. Humanity has learned this lesson the hard way. We nearly destroyed ourselves with wars and greed and hate. We survived because we learned to work together, to build rather than burn. President appeared via hologram beside the ambassador. Her image was 10 meters tall, filling the center of the chamber. We did not come here to conquer, she said. We came here to offer something better, a new order based on cooperation instead of domination, fair trade instead of tribute, protection for the weak instead of exploitation. The speaker hissed from her platform. Pretty words, but you have the fleet. What stops you from simply taking what you want? Our own conscience, replied. And the knowledge that empires built on force never last. We want to build something that will endure for, not crumble within centuries. She outlined humanity's terms. The galaxy would be reorganized under a new galactic alliance. All species, great and small, would have representation. Slavery would be abolished. 6 council races had practiced it openly. Trade would be free and fair with no forced tribute. In exchange, humanity would share its military knowledge. They would help defend member worlds against outside threats. They would train soldiers and officers in the tactics that had won the war. You ask us to give up much, observed. We ask you to give up injustice, countered. Is that really so much? The vote was unanimous, not because the council agreed with humanity's ideals, but because they had no choice. Their fleets were shattered. Their empires were crumbling. They could accept humanity's offer or face destruction. They chose survival. In the years that followed, the galaxy transformed. Human engineers traveled to war-torn worlds, helping rebuild cities and infrastructure. Human doctors brought medicine to species that had never known proper health care. Human teachers established schools where the children of former slaves could learn and grow. Admiral Park retired to a small colony world called New Sol. He built a house on a hill overlooking fields of alien wheat and spent his days watching ships pass overhead. Commander visited him often, bringing news of the fleet she now commanded. "The remnants have agreed to join the alliance," she told him one afternoon. "They are tired of civil war, they want peace." Park nodded slowly, sipping tea from an old ceramic cup. "And the taking longer, but they will come around. They always do in the end." She sat beside him, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. "Do you ever wonder if we did the right thing?" she asked. "We could have crushed them completely, made sure they could never threaten us again." Park was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "When I was young, I fought in wars between humans. I watched cities burn and families die. I thought that was how the universe worked. The strong destroy the weak, and that is all." He set down his cup. "But then I got older. I saw children playing in rebuilt cities. I saw former enemies becoming friends. I realized that destruction is easy. Anyone can destroy, building something new, something better, that takes real courage." Smiled, "The galaxy still has a long way to go." "It does, but we pushed it in the right direction. That is enough for one lifetime." Across the galaxy, new generations grew up in a changed universe. Alien children asked their teachers about the humans, the strange species that had defeated 12 empires and then offered them peace. The teachers told them the truth, or at least the version of truth they understood. Humans were fragile. They lived barely a century. They came from a harsh world that had tried to kill them at every turn. They had spent most of their history fighting each other. But they had never stopped learning, never stopped adapting, never stopped reaching for the stars. When the universe laughed at them, they did not run. They did not hide. They stood up and fought back. And when they won, they did not become the monsters they had defeated. They chose to be something better. That was humanity's gift to the galaxy. Not weapons or technology, but hope. The proof that even the smallest, weakest species could rise above their circumstances and change the universe. On Earth, a monument stood in the center of New Geneva, the capital of the United Nations of Earth. It was a simple pillar of black stone, carved with 40,000 names, every person who had died in the Battle of the Line. At the base of the monument, a single sentence was engraved in every human language. "They laughed at us, we rose anyway." Tourists from 100 worlds came to see it. Former enemies laid flowers at its base. Children too young to remember the war ran and played in its shadow. The galaxy had laughed at humanity once. Now they stood together, building a future no one had thought possible. And in the endless dark between stars, humanity's ships still flew. Explorers, traders, peacekeepers, each one carrying the spirit that had brought them from caves to the stars. They were no longer alone in the universe. But they were still, and always would be, unmistakably human. The stars had never looked brighter.